Hey there, everyone. It is Kristi, and hopefully this is going up live because I didn't hear the ding in my ear, but presuming it is. Hello, how are you? Good to see you. Thanks for joining us. And this week, or actually this month, for the Patron Hangout, we had two, one at the very start of the month and one as close to the end as I could get, which is the holiday weekend. But I am happy to be joined in the Patron Hangout this second time this month with Xander. Say hello, Xander.
Hey there.
And Tom.
Hello, Tom. Oh, wait. Okay.
So, I guess we'll just start out, maybe talk a little bit about things that are maybe secular related or anything else, and then we can go into the facepalm moments. But I think the thing maybe I can bring up, because it's my channel, I can plug my stuff, is I just put up a video. I don't know if you guys had a chance to see it, but it was making the argument that the American Revolution was actually not biblical, and really goes against what the direct teachings of the Bible are, and yet you don't really hear Christians talking about that. And so, I don't know if either of you had had a chance to see that.
Oh, I saw it. I actually commented on Facebook.
Yeah. And you want to mention what your comment was, or?
Yeah. I had thought about that before, but in seeing your video, I started thinking, even in spite of how not biblical the American Revolution and our secular Constitution is, we still have these people today that say that this is a God-blessed nation, that this is God's favored nation, maybe second to Israel, but, who cares about that?
Pretty close, if not tied.
Yeah, well, I think we're ahead, but, they got to say Israel for Old Testament reasons. And somehow we've gotten, and I didn't say it in the post, but I'm thinking, I wonder if that comes from the British Israel thing, where Britain, the Northern European and especially Britain, was settled theoretically by the lost tribes of Israel, so we were really the inheritors of the promise. And America is sort of the purest form of that in these crazy people's minds.
I think there was a period, and I think I might have been out sick during this day in history class for U.S. history, but the Great Awakening in the 1800s, where this narrative of the United States being a chosen nation was concocted because it was quite different from what the founders had. And the sort of linkages with Jerusalem and linkages with Israel go quite deep into the rhetoric of American Christianity. Yeah.
Well, that's where Mormonism actually came from in some ways, because there was this whole thing about the lost tribes of Israel being having come to America, and Joseph Smith just went a little bit apeshit with that and took it a little further and made a whole religion out of it.
Don't you eventually graduate to like ruling planets in that?
Mormonism? Yeah. You have your own planet, and you have all your spirit wives, and have all these billions of spirit children.
Yeah, I guess it's good that I'm bi-curious with all my spirit wives. I don't know, it's always just so assumed male-centered. I've always felt bad for the women in these religions. I
don't think you get spirit wives. Well, I don't know. Maybe in Reformed Mormonism, really Reformed Mormonism.
The thing that always annoys me, or quite often annoys me, is this idea. I saw it recently again with someone talking about guns, and that the guns are our Creator endowed us with these natural rights, including a right to a firearm, which is just ridiculous. And that was a post that I'd done a couple of years ago on a forum. And I thought, when I was looking for material to do videos on when I first started my channel, I went back into that forum and dug out some of my better posts, and that was one of them. And it's an issue that doesn't really get called out in terms of quoting the Bible against what Christians in the U.S. are saying about where their rights come from.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh yeah, guns are in the Bible.
Yes, right next to, after you turn the other cheek, you pull out your sidearm and you fire at will.
Yeah, it's in the Bible, not under that name. It's sort of like dinosaurs are there, but not under the name. They find all sorts of things in the Bible that may or may not have been intended.
Yes. Well, if you guys are ready, let's go over some
Yep.
articles that deal with secularism and atheism, mostly in the U.S., although there's one that's more of a general study. And the first one we're going to be dealing with is, and this dumb video is going to come up, so I'm going to have to hit pause again to stop it. Well, it being Easter weekend and all, I thought it would be appropriate to discuss it because it's timely and topical. There was an article here in Christian Post that Billy Graham was calling on Christians to cast away their doubts in God. And I'll just scroll down here to the bit where he is quoted as saying, "Lay your doubts at the foot of the cross and ask God to help you see Jesus as he really is." Yeah, and I just thought it would be a timely time to discuss the whole idea of blind faith and this notion in religion that somehow doubt is wrong and scary and should be set aside and prayed about, not engaged with. Sandra, do you want to come up on that topic at all?
Well, faith is like the main cornerstone of any religion, isn't it? It's to doubt is like the main way that you're going to be able to pick apart a religion, any religion's issues or any problems with it, and so it's spouting the same thing every day, isn't it? It's nothing really new.
When I had a little stint as a Buddhist. Well, not little, it was about 5 years. But when I left Catholicism, and by the way, got joined by Matthew, or how do you want to be referred to? Matt, Maddie. We can't hear you. Matthew! His mic's not on. But one of the things that attracted me, while he sorts that out, about Buddhism was when the teacher said, what the Buddha said was, don't take my word because they call me Buddha, take my teachings, test them out the way a goldsmith would test out gold, and if they work for you, then take them and use them. And I thought, I'd never heard a religious leader say, don't take it on faith, go practice it yourself. Now, of course, I did put that into practice and ended up leaving Buddhism as well. But I was shocked by its honesty. And to be fair, there's a lot of just not religious like magic, but wisdom in Buddhism that gets wrapped up with a lot of things like karma and rebirth. But there's also just a lot of common sense that really does help you calm down in terms of how you interact with the world. So in defense of, some religion / philosophy with supernatural elements, I guess.
Yeah.
Well, that's what religion mostly is, isn't it? It's all ethos. It's all just about trust. There's no logic or reasoning. It's more, well, ethos and pathos, I guess. There's it's if you don't have logic or reasoning, the only way that you're going to be able to persuade someone into the argument is just pure faith and working on your emotions, like the people who are troubled, the people who are in not really in good places right now. They offer great things for nothing, basically, just that you believe. That's it.
The way you say reminds me a lot of my frustrations with Karen Armstrong and her mystical god.
Yeah.
A lot of emotion built up on fancy words.
Which is basically Christian apologetics. I mean, there's nobody knows. You have to believe it, but there's nothing really there.
Once you peek under the curtain.
Yeah, I think I told you. Well, I'm sure I told you. My parents, when they were getting married, they come from a very religious family, and they didn't like that. From religious families from different religions, very restrictive, and they went to a bunch of churches, and they found finally, after many churches, they talked to an Episcopalian priest who said, "We don't have all the answers either. We're all searching, and it's just find it out." And so they said, "That's for us." And then when it's kind of a cascading effect. They went from really. Their parents were really religious. They were more interested in thinking about stuff, and eventually I wound up as an atheist. So I wonder what my son's going to be. I'm not sure there's any place else to go.
So we have another guest joining us, but I wanted to do a mic check. Oh, no, we can't hear you. All right, I've got the chat box open, so I've put a message for you in there, but I'll communicate there with you in a second. But why don't I get on to the next story, since that gives me to chat about and maybe work on the audio. The next one has to do with a bill that, oh, wait, you guys can't see my screen. I have to remember to turn on the screen share, otherwise it's just going to be me looking stupid and my eyes running back and forth as I'm reading. Right, so this one has to do with another attempt with the legislature to legalize discrimination. I think that's the easiest way to accurately describe the bill. It would allow people to opt out, as I think the thing here would stop pastors from performing same-sex marriages and faith-based organizations deny the use of their facilities for things outside of their religious belief. And the NFL, like a lot of corporations, are saying we don't want to be associated with that, and they are asking that, or looking at the idea of not to bypass the NFL in terms of future Super Bowl host deals. And it reminds me of this. People just passing a law doesn't change people's attitudes. The fight continues. The struggle continues after the laws get changed, because just because the laws are changed doesn't mean the attitudes have changed. And this is the case with homophobia as well. And so even though we've had a major Supreme Court decision, the fight goes on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, actually, The Walking Dead is moving out of Georgia too if this bill gets passed and signed.
I just wonder if this is going to be a real generational thing, whereas in 30 years enough American Christians will have come over to the side of equality and can divide that sort of my personal religious beliefs versus people's legal rights a bit more clearly than a lot of the religious leaders seem to be able to do today, especially on the right wing of the Republican Party.
Well, what I hear about millennials is encouraging on that score. It seems like they are much more accepting of people who are different in a number of different ways.
Yeah, and it feels that that it's actually becoming more and more that discourse of say gender norms or traditional ideas of relationships is now more than ever before in my lifetime, including trans issues and trans people. And it feels like there's sort of this, like, there were bits and bobs of it before, but I don't know if it was around the time of Caitlyn Jenner really erasing consciousness, or and maybe that is it, that before, when these issues came up, they were local issues that didn't get national press, but now with more national attention, we're starting to hear more people's stories and see more activism as more and more people who are transitioning are coming out, just like when with lesbian and gay people coming out to their families, and it becomes less about a theoretical stranger and more about somebody in your workplace.
Mm-hmm.
Normalizing, basically.
Yeah. Well, what I mentioned before we went on air about this mother in Alberta, Canada.
Yeah, tell the background a little bit, if you don't mind.
Okay. Yeah. Her name is M.H. I'm going to say it in German. Wiebe.
Weber.
Wiebe. W-I-E-B-E.
Okay.
So it's not. I'm sure they don't pronounce it that way in Alberta, but she did a response to Alberta, the province of Alberta, being a little bit less assholey to transgendered people with bathroom issues, and she did a rap. I just got a little stabbing headache when I said that. A rap about it's not really that big a deal. Why are we bothering to change this stuff just for these few transgender people? And it was actually a produced thing, not well produced, but it was. I mean, there was staging and lighting, and a couple different cameras and angles, and it's called Gender Bender. or Fender Bender, one of the two. So if anybody wanted to look it up, that would be, look up Alberta, Viva, Weeby, Weeb.
Weber, maybe?
No, there's no R.
Oh, okay, with an E at the end.
Yeah, Viva.
There are a lot of reasons to object to cultural appropriation, depending on the circumstances, but it sounds like there are just like a whole list of ways that when I'm watching this, I'm going to be finding things to shake my head at.
Yeah. Well, where I was going with that, in addition to just being, funny and irritating, is that once you put it up, the likes to dislikes ratio were like 800 and some dislikes to 11 likes, and it's gotten play all over at least the liberal media in the States. Young Turks talked about it, several other outlets talked about it, and it looks like even in Alberta, it sounds like she's getting a little bit of heat for this. So I suspect that there is this change, and it might be generational in this case, because a lot of this is coming from the new media.
Yeah, good point. I think that we've talked about the impact of the internet on atheism, and I think a lot of studies would probably point to, although they haven't, I don't think, been able to causally link, like you see the two patterns, you go, I think there's something there, but I don't know that they've measured internet consumption to, a rate at which someone becomes an atheist or anything like that.
Yeah.
But even with, again, social media, alternative media, that too, it's having a generally liberalizing effect, I think.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, Sandra, like in the in the UK, things are a lot less prudish, but are there also the same kind of resistance you find to transgendered equality in public places?
I'm not really sure. The only place where I've seen much resistance to it is certain places on the internet, and so I can't really say for. See, it's always different online than it is in the real life. Like you hear so much complaints about it, but in real life, I've never heard in the news, never in my own experience, seen any discrimination against it whatsoever. I think the most people that I've heard is some snide remarks about it behind someone's back about being LGBT or anything like that. But no, nothing outrageous or outlandish.
Of course, a big difference being in Europe is that because of space constraints, sometimes you just have unisex bathrooms. And so, there's, I think, a little bit more exposure perhaps to Europeans of that using that space, or that, because the thing about the whole issue about bathrooms is it's always male legislators obsessed with women's bathrooms. And I don't know, I think being the a woman here, we have stalls. We don't have urinals the way you guys do. So really, it's you just go in your stall. It's not like the women's issue. The women's restrooms issue to me is like not an issue at all, because everyone has their own private stalls. It's not even a big deal. I just think it's because perhaps it's a mystery to these male legislators, and they don't know what happens in these women's bathrooms. They become these wonderlands of, I don't know, pillowcase fights or whatever. That they don't want the sorority things and women putting up lipstick in very sensuous ways all the time. That's their idea of a ladies' restroom. I don't know. I'm just really rambling here, but I just don't understand why it's so offensive.
I think I saw a cartoon based around that exact idea, where the boys were really curious about what went on in the girls' bathroom, and so there was an entire half an hour dedicated to trying to get in to see what was going on. And when they got in, it was a bathroom. It was nothing different.
There was a teen film too about this guy the boy who snuck into a girl's bathroom in high school, and he thought his luck was in, because two really attractive young women, he knew by voice, he didn't see them, took the stalls to either side of him, and he was going, oh good, something great is going to happen here. And they started to do their business, and they played a game called Battle Shits. I don't know if you've ever heard of that. but they
Yeah.
took turns while taking a shit, and really loud and stinky. And I sunk your battleship. Oh no, you hit my destroyer. And they finished up and went out. And at the end of it, he came out of the stall and he was just shaken. He was like, "This was not good. This is not what I had in mind."
Be careful what you wish for.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, in the end of the day, it's just a bathroom. That's
Yeah. I don't think you get a lot of Porky's kind of
situations that movies.
situations
Yes.
where you get something really salacious in a woman's bathroom.
For those under the age of 40, Porky's is a reference to a late 70s or 80s sort of. It was the American Pie of its day, I guess, is one way to say it. But aimed, sort of more at boys. Yeah. So. Well, hey, let's move on to the next story. And that is going to be this one, which I think is quite interesting, comes out of the Times India. But they have a study that was done on people to evaluate for prejudices, and they find that not only are people who are religious unconsciously biased against atheists, but some atheists are also biased against atheists. And in the study, they had there was an experiment where someone had an accident, and the researchers presented the participants with a story about a man who reversed a car into a van one day and didn't leave his insurance details. Later on, when he found a wallet, he removed money from it for himself, and respondents thought that the man was more likely to be an atheist. So it suggests that anti-atheist distrust is deep and culturally ingrained, regardless of an individual's group membership. And this comes back to notions of, just unconscious bias that we all have. And I know people, a lot of times when there's discussions of sexism, will discuss it as if it's always men who are being sexist against women. But if women internalize this sexism too, then women are also going to be more likely to be sexist against women and hire the man because of these unconscious biases. So when this study came up, and even atheists are susceptible to this unconscious bias, I think it just shows that we need a lot of education and these kinds of studies in the social sciences to expose these things so that we can be aware of them, because you can't fix them until you're aware of them. Anyone have thoughts on that?
I just wanted to quickly ask, does it that much of a distrust in atheists, or is it more the idea of, say, for example, you see the person taking the money for himself, would the reasoning be, a Christian wouldn't do that, therefore he's an atheist?
Well, that you can't speculate on in terms of what people were actually thinking. You can only say what they reported. Mm-hmm. But there might be he doesn't have morals kind of.
So would we call it distrust of atheists, or more trust of religious people, more than anything else?
You might say that there's perhaps a bit of a halo effect. If someone associates themselves with a religion, they're trying to a little bit have that holiness or sanctity rub off on them. Even like the phrase, "Oh, that's very Christian of you."
Yeah.
Kind of thing.
No,
I think there's a lot of unconscious biases that we all, don't. Well, they're unconscious, so we're not necessarily that strongly aware of them. Sometimes, they'll pop out, and like, oh wow, did I think that? Where did that thought come from? Or, not even necessarily realizing it. So.
Well, I watch a lot of Steve Shive's Atheist Reads videos, and I read some apologetics, and there is a great deal of apologetics that focuses on the moral argument, and that you need to have you need to have some sort of trust in something outside yourself, and essentially God. It has to be a higher power. It can't be society, or can't be the human nature or anything like that. And I think that works because of this unconscious bias, that we think that I don't know if it's been we've been trained to think this way, or there's that thing in our brain that ascribes agency to things outside ourselves, that if we don't have that outside agent, that we have to find morals from within ourselves, that's going to fail at critical points, and we're going to do things that just feel good, and that's where you get that you just want to sin. You really believe in God, but you just want to sin. I'm thinking, I kill exactly as many people as I want to. I steal exactly as much as I want to steal, and I rape exactly as many women as I want to rape. That's
that might be my favorite Penn Jillette quote.
Yes, yeah. I was trying to think of the originator of that. I don't want to take credit for it, but yeah, and that's zero.
Mm.
And if your religion is the only thing keeping you from doing those things, don't leave your religion, because that
be worse for society.
That's scary for the rest of us. It's the only thing holding you back. And Ray Comfort and what's his butt buddy?
Kirk Cameron. His banana.
Kirk Cameron and Eric Hovind, and I've heard a number of those people say that very thing. If it weren't for my religion, yeah, it does say more about the person than the religion. Yeah, if it weren't for their religion, they would be horrible people.
Yeah, Matthew was saying, even though his audio doesn't work, that it says more about the person if the only thing keeping them from committing crimes is their faith.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, that's what I was responding to. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I know that, again, talking about unconscious biases, when I was traveling over the weekend back from a conference, I had used my cash card, and when I went to get it out again, I couldn't find it. And I looked in my wallet, and I looked in my other wallet, because I have two wallets depending on which currency I need, and I got my bag out, and I got my coat out, and every jacket, and everything else, and I just couldn't find it anywhere. And you're like, and even, as an atheist, you want to appeal to the universe. Oh, just don't let someone have pickpocketed it. Don't let there be like 1,000 euros out of my account. Pleading with what? Just have to, and that's where the Buddhism comes in, where when you see a situation and you go, no, instead in Buddhism you go, yes, this is a thing that happened to me. Yes, I have lost my card. Be one with the loss of the card. Okay, let's move on. So I blocked it, and then I went and I opened up my mobile phone, and I had stuck it in I didn't even look in my phone because I never put anything in my phone. There it was. I was like, oh, I'm so relieved. I want to hug someone. I want to thank someone. Even though I was the idiot responsible, so at the end of the day. But that instinct of gratitude, and also when you're helpless, of wanting help, I think those are really, really powerful and primal urges that we've had basically since we were kids, because when we were children, we were hungry or cold or anything else, someone did fix it for us. Or we were happy and we had something happy happen to us, someone would hug us. So that call response, I think, lasts into adulthood, and people I would speculate that that's also what they're mirroring in that relationship with God, which Freud also calls like how God is a dad figure.
So in that case, the Christians were right. An atheist did take your card.
They did take your card?
Yeah, an atheist stole your card. It happened to be you. It didn't work. All right. It was so much better in my head. I'm sorry.
That's okay. Xander, anything you want to add to that?
I wanted to actually bring up a comment someone put on that in that article, and then they basically just said that atheists have no reference point for guessing their behaviour, while with people religious, you have their religion as a sort of basis to see what they're going to be like. Or with atheists, they're just sort of a big question mark. So that's actually a good reasoning for the distrust.
Yeah, I mean it's pretty simplistic, but at least there's some kind of corollary, because of course the question is, well, yeah, if you want to know how much you should sell your daughter into slavery for, the Bible is a good place to start because it spells it out quite clearly. But yeah, I mean there is that assumption that somehow holy people are more moral, and there is a huge job facing anyone who, especially if they leave religion, but I would imagine even as you're growing up, is to say, yeah, what is the basis of my morality? And having to work through that process yourself and understand when you're presented with a new moral conundrum, how do I feel about this? Where does this fit? What's my instinctual reaction? What's my reasoned reaction to this new thing?
Yeah, and reasoning is harder.
Yeah. Yes. And there's no one to there's no one to tell you what to do or think. And I have seen studies of personality types that some people prefer a black and white situation. They're very uncomfortable with areas of gray, where I'm not. I'm quite happy with ambiguity and going, I don't know. Maybe I'll die not knowing. Maybe I'll never know. And that's just going to have to be something I live with. But some people find that incredibly psychologically discomforting.
People hate complexity.
Some people do, yeah. Yes. They'd rather say build a wall than go, well, let's look at the economic migration of two populations and determine whether or not there's a way to.
No, build a damn wall.
It's.
I hate Mexicans. Build a wall. That's much easier than this whole. But and they pay into Social Security, but they never take it out because they're not legal, and so that's helping the older people in our country. And
yeah, I mean, if you actually looked at getting people who are in the black economy onto the tax rolls and contributing not only in the sales taxes but also in the various other taxes that they pay, you could do a lot to address the deficit with all these new taxable revenues without raising tax rates anywhere, just by bringing people into the economy formally. But, all right, well then let's get on with kind of moving a little bit toward the political side of things anyway. The last article that I wanted to share was an opinion piece that had been written by Annie Laurie Gaylor in the Wisconsin State Journal on Wisconsin, where the primary is happening next week, or not the following week, but the 5th of April, I think it is?
Yeah, yes.
And the article is in many ways calling on people who are agnostic, atheists, no affiliation, to start to realize their own political power and give more consistent voices and identify openly as atheists or agnostics or a nun with an O, not with a U. I'm a non. We have to pronunciate non versus none. I don't know. This signs like I'm atheist and I vote, because unless we start to organize ourselves and speak up for ourselves, our issues aren't going to be brought forward. So why is it so hard to get atheists to unify around things?
We're cats.
Herding cats.
Herding cats. Well, look at the atheists just on YouTube. There's trying to get anybody behind anything other than not believing in God, and you come up against this all the time. Sargon is apparently an atheist, and in pretty much every other way, he doesn't fit with anything that you fit with.
Yeah, I think that there's those of us who, I guess want to be politically active, such as myself, and I consider educating, like bringing issues of the American Constitution and the Bible up on YouTube as part of that activism. But yeah, there is a big whereas with Christianity in the U.S. and across the world, obviously, you have a natural focal point where you can organize people on a weekly basis, and then networks that are built up around that. Whereas atheists, traditionally in the U.S., it's mostly been lawsuits. But yeah, we're starting to see more community organizing, but then that brings in issues of intersectionality that some people don't want to make part of it. But you can't bring people in. You can't bring a diverse group of people into anything and not take on board intersectionality, I don't think.
Right. Well, go ahead.
Go ahead, sorry.
No.
Oh, you're so polite. Sandra, you start, and then Tom will go, because he, I think, just said something, so you go, Sandra, first.
I just wanted to say that with religion, there's something, like, religious people, I'm going to say the majority here, I don't have stats or anything on this, but they define themselves by the religion, they live their lives based on their religion. With atheists, it's not. They don't base their lives around living without a presence of God. They just don't define themselves by it at all. So there's no focal point to grab atheists onto. So there's like they all define themselves by different things instead of non-religion. So there's no way to just grab atheists together.
Yeah, I think there are atheists who don't assume an atheist identity and other people who very much do, and maybe that's where that conflict is coming from. Tom, you were going to...
Yeah, fitting in with that, I think, is the whole business a few years ago of Atheism Plus, where people, P.C. Myers and some other folks, wanted to add things other than not believing in a God or gods to atheism as sort of core tenets, basically social justice sorts of things. And I think a lot of the current negatives, negative reactions to feminism, feminist atheists, to SJWs as a pejorative, comes from that people not wanting to be labeled as anything as a group other than atheist. And so I think, at least my opinion, my impression of that was that there was a lot of pushback to the whole Atheism Plus kind of thing. And I think now when you talk about intersectionality, you're getting that same sort of thing, where people are saying, I'm an atheist and I'm not a feminist. I'm not, or at least not certain kinds of feminism.
When I first started my channel, what I started with, and I want to pick up someday, but it's like I realized an entire research project on its own, is this understanding deconversion of people going from faith out of faith. And what became apparent very quickly was the importance of intersectionality to people's reactions to other people's deconversion stories. So even if a person was a guy, but he was Catholic, I related a lot more to his deconversion story because I understood the way that the Catholic Church sort of indoctrinates you as a child and the belief systems that go along with them. And I also was gathering all this information, and the stories I was hearing from African Americans talked very much about their location in culture and the role of cultural Christianity in discourse. Phrases like, you need Jesus, or he's got the devil in him, all these kinds of things that people weave in and out of their daily lives. That's nothing I've ever experienced, partly because I'm, Catholic, and people, like those kinds of things, you say prayers to Saint Joseph or whatever, those kind of things. But, and yeah, if people out there are frustrated or alone or are on their way to atheism, they're on their path to atheism, then hearing someone whose story is just like yours is really important for that connection and to know that you can do it too. But in order to have those voices, all those different resources, then everyone has to, people with a lot of different backgrounds need to get their voices up and out and heard and respected, and the perspective that they're bringing respected. And also, and this is something that there was a guy on Bill Maher, I can't remember his name for the life of me, I'm really bad at names anyway, but American people too, I just don't see the television enough to know their names. But he was talking about Beyonce's performance with the Super Bowl and the song Formation. And he said, look, the song Formation, when she's talking about, Jackson nostrils and how she likes her baby hair with afro, he's like, that song, that's not for you, white people. That's for us. This isn't about you. This is about our culture. This is a song that we understand when she's singing. And when I was just thinking about the upcoming debate in terms of, with feminism and being good for the world, I realized that's kind of part of it, is that there are discussions, like when Kim Kardashian took that picture of herself nude and put it up on social media. Women started having a discussion about, is this a good role model for our children? Is she exploiting herself? Is this her right to show her body in whatever way she thinks is most, that she wants to, and this an empowerment issue? And there was a lot of people whose voices were in there, but in some ways I just kind of went like, guys, this is something that I think just, not that you can't talk about it, but this is also something that women need to talk about as women, because it's our daughters, it's our bodies. We're the ones who have to make these decisions and try to communicate values to girls, or when girls come up with these questions, have answers for it. And so, yeah, just having that sort of this isn't about you. This is just for, people can have their own conversations, but because they end up in the public sphere, I think some people feel, and they are entitled to have an opinion about it, but just because you have an opinion doesn't mean your opinion is going to matter. So. That was a little bit of a rant. Kind of brought in a lot of things there, but I hope it all made sense in the end. Oh, we're really quiet today, guys.
Sorry, I was just trying to take that all in.
Yeah. I thought it was a girl thing, so I wasn't.
Your silence on your silence. I'm speaking my mind. Yeah. Just be a good ally and stand behind me and don't talk.
Yeah.
I find the idea really interesting. The idea where some conversations are just for certain people, and you can't have that on the internet at all in a public sphere.
Yeah, I mean, well, I think, there are possibilities. If your channel's small enough and nobody cares about the topic, you can have, a bunch of people on and have that conversation. But once you kind of start to put that out there for other people as resources, yeah, then you kind of open up for reactions, including reactions you don't like. That's part of being, in the public sphere. It doesn't mean that you should be harassed or bullied or insulted, for it. But then people who are watching it, I think also, sometimes when people are having, like the whole thing about formation, it wasn't about me. I really like the song. I enjoy it, and I can just appreciate it as art. I don't need to have a massive opinion on it. And again, sometimes just because you have an opinion doesn't mean that people have to take it seriously.
I think people thinking about it, because I'm a swing voter in everything in life, basically. I don't have a very strong opinion on most things, so I can't really say for myself, but I think people, when they hear something that doesn't apply to them, they want to try to shape it so they're also involved. So it also, like the idea of empowerment, and which was very much a female issue when discussing who was it again? Kim Kardashian.
Yeah, Kim Kardashian.
Yeah, when they were discussing that, it was very much a female issue conversation. But then, if a lot of guys would try to pile in and try to make it about, oh, there's also male empowerment, there's also this and this and this. So it's like they didn't want to be ignored more than anything else. And I think that's the idea of why there is so much pushback on feminism on them. It's like people don't like being left out when it isn't necessarily leaving people out.
Can I give you an example that I see all the time living in Europe as an American? When Americans will come over here for the first time.
Yeah,
maybe if you know a lot of Americans, you'll recognize this. Maybe everybody did this, but I notice this with Americans. And you'll be explaining to people, someone will be explaining how they do something in their native country. And at the end of the sentence, they'll just go, well, in America, this is how we do it. And they'll just start well, you're not in America. Shut the hell up. I'm like, listen, I'm trying to tell you something. I kind of got the same feeling about wanting to be included by talking about yourself in somebody else's conversation when you were describing that.
That'll happen in all conversation, really. I've having conversations about, oh, I went to X place, and then they will go, oh, I went there, it was great, I did this and this and this. No, I was talking about when I was there. It's ingrained in human life, I guess. It's just wanting to be centre of attention, be involved.
Yeah, and it's wanting to be showing you're including, you're trying to be part of it, but then at the same point, you're just taking over the conversation.
Yeah. So I think I agree with the idea that there are some conversations where not everyone can or should get involved with, even though we want to really badly.
Yeah, that's probably where a lot of the frustration with the safe spaces issue comes up. But on the other hand, if you have people who have survived sexual assault, and they want to, I would imagine it's the same kind of thing when you have various kinds of anonymous, Alcoholic Anonymous or Addicts Anonymous, because there's a level of, when somebody else has been through it, there's a kind of comfort and empathy that if you haven't been through it, or soldiers coming back from war, what it's like to be in a battlefield, I will never know that. I can listen empathetically, and I can admire, and my heart can break, or I can be a human being. But I can't relate to that lived experience in any meaningful way. So if people wanted to go away and talk about that with only other people who've been through it, I wouldn't be like, hey, I have a right to be in here too. I'd be like, yeah, I hope that really helps you.
Yeah, speaking of alcoholics, when I was recovering from alcohol addiction, I did go to AA, and it was when you mention that, it would be really strange if somebody came in and said and was listening and felt compassion and wanted to help out and said, have you tried this? Have you tried that? Well, the thing is that the people in the room, have tried all those things. You know, you're not going to come up with anything particularly new or interesting or useful. And if you and there is the potential at some point, and probably fairly early, to be either to be judgmental or to be perceived as being judgmental in a situation where people who are fragile are very sensitive to that kind of thing and could very well shut down and feel like, well, whoa, I can't, this is not where I can be. This is not a safe place. And I wonder if that's kind of where the safe place is coming from also. The people feel a need to be someplace where they can gain the strength to be out in public and live the rest of their lives with having rebuilt that strength within them.
When I came across it, it was not the sort of like phrase that triggers people now, safe spaces, but I was involved with the United States Student Association, which anyone who's hates liberals will probably know that organization and not be at all surprised that I was in USSA. But one of the things about USSA, and this was in the 90s, early 90s, there were LGBT groups, and when we would have our conventions, they would have the groups that would break out. And the LGBT group was a closed meeting because people who were attending those meetings weren't always out, sometimes even people in their class, like the people they were traveling with, or their families or friends or anything else. And we had a lot of pushback from Republican white guys who felt that any meeting that is there with student representatives doing legislative stuff on students' behalf should be open to the public, and they should be able to go in and watch people discuss things. And the people running the conference were like, no, their privacy rights trump your desire to go and watch them, and the things that come out will be made public and discussed on the floor anyway. But that sort of just on principle, feeling excluded from something that you feel you have a right to attend, regardless of what the reason for that is I don't know if that would technically count as a safe space. I'm assuming it would, but those fights have really been going on for at least 20 years.
Hmm.
Everyone's very pensive and thoughtful.
Well, I'm trying to think back when I was younger. I do know that I screwed up an awful lot of stuff by not understanding that the conversation that I was in, my contribution to it was not at all helpful. I didn't grow up with any, for instance, Jews in the community that I knew about. I knew there turned out to be some that were in my class, but nobody talked about it. We were Catholics and Lutherans. I was Episcopalian, so I was very strange. All the Lutherans thought I was a Catholic. All the Catholics thought I was a Lutheran. We
going to hell no matter what.
Yeah. We and we had all the presidents, and so we were fine. But when I got to college, I met a few Jewish kids, and I was fascinated because I had no idea what was going on, and I would ask questions, and it was like, an example today might be if I first met some black people and wanted to touch their hair, and it was like that curiosity is perfectly innocent, but it's not welcome.
Well, and also I think there's a lot of consciousness raising that's been done, fortunately, so that people now know not to do, like at the time, well, when you were probably a kid, and kids ask weird, like blunt questions anyway, but just the idea of I guess kind of check your privilege and realize that there's other ways of doing it and being more sensitive, and I think that I was thinking actually about a discussion people were having on another show. I think it was Demotivator Opinion on his show had someone on who was talking about blackface. And this guy sounded younger, probably like in his 20s maybe, and he just didn't get why blackface was a problem. And I'm not gonna so what I'm gonna say is they had a discussion about it, and you can watch it if I'm remembering this correctly on Demotivator Opinions thing. But what was clear to me was that this young man had no idea what the history of blackface was. He had no idea of its symbolic meaning in entertainment. The fact that there was still a black and white minstrel show being on air until the 1970s in the UK, if I'm remembering this correctly. And that it was really embedded in racial stereotypes. And then I started thinking, well, how could he be so ignorant? How could he be so ignorant? He was in his 20s. But then I remembered that since it was pointed out how incredibly offensive and racist the black and white minstrel shows and blackface were, it's been scrubbed out of cartoons. It's been scrubbed out of old movies that they would put into circulation. When I saw it on Mad Men, my jaw dropped. And so in some ways, the fact that he was like, oh, I just want to play an ethnic character, so I want to put on something that makes me look more like that character, in some ways I thought was a symbol of the success of eradicating blackface from the culture. That's a good thing. But the bad thing is then, because culturally the people who lived through it or remember it are still around, when they see it, it brings back all that other, it obviously reminds them of all the things that why we got rid of it in the first place. So at least it occurred to me that there was like a kind of a good thing and a bad thing, that we've eradicated it, but that ignorance means that people don't understand the cultural context of why it is. And it's not that we're being hypersensitive SJW types. It's just like when Louis C.K. said about, if you see a black man who has gray in his hair, he remembers a time when he had to use a separate bathroom. So, let him be pissed off about that. Wouldn't you be? And yeah, and so these are like kind of getting off of the atheism stories that we normally talk about, but hopefully it's an interesting conversation. And yeah, that was what I had thought about that thing, about sometimes we can be victims of our success.
Yeah, I'm talking about cartoons. I am the old person here. I don't think Matt is not my elder. And I remember when I was a kid, and even into college, Disney cartoons even had racial stereotypes. You had, the Black Crows, and you had, what's his name, Uncle Remus. Uncle Remus. And it wasn't too much before my time that Amos and Andy were very popular on the radio, and they were just absolute stereotypes of black people, and very absolute stereotypes of black culture. And I remember seeing Jolson in blackface singing "Mammy," and I don't remember if that. I don't think that was live, but it was broadcast. It would be a tape or some kind of TV magic from when he was doing that as a regular part of his act. And more recently, you don't see that. You're right. It's been scrubbed. And I think, well, that's one of the things interesting about YouTube, because you get to see some of these old cartoons where they'll bring back these sort of modern-day banned cartoons, and they're shocking. And that's from somebody who grew up with, not thinking of them as strange at all.
Yeah, because they were part of the culture.
Yeah.
They were just part of what you saw we were exposed to. Yeah, and people today aren't exposed to that. And, so if you have, and there are lots of parts of America which are 90+% white and pretty rural, populations of under 75,000, shall we say, and kids grow up and they see a lot of multiculturalism on television, so they're aware of other elements of American, the variety of American culture, Hispanic culture, African American culture, music and art, all that kind of stuff. But they live in, as most, I did, in a white bubble, so they don't have any experience of seeing the kind of racial discrimination that when people in Ferguson are talking, or just anybody that if you have an interaction or if people are asked about it, if African Americans or Hispanic Americans or other are asked about their experiences and you actually listen, they don't have that information. So again, it's just like really, it's a naivete, and it's not meant in any malicious way, but it's just so blind, in some, like I said, because the culture now gives them a lot of positive message, and it's in some ways I think people are like the star who went dressed up like one of the characters from Orange Is the New Black. It's like not aware of the cultural context for everyone over the age of 30 that goes along with that. Yeah, so culture does have an incredibly profound unconscious and conscious effect on our brains, and so when somebody, I guess what it made me do is be maybe a little bit more patient with someone who's like, well, who's under the age of 25, shall we say, and says, what's the problem with blackface? And like, oh, well, let me explain, because you're not being a bad person, you just don't know. So this is an opportunity for you to learn about how horrible our country was, and parts of it still are, and why we need to work and be good allies, and make sure that the kinds of stereotypes that went along with blackface don't get reintroduced into the culture, or call them out in other areas of the culture, like Fox News, where we see them still being perpetuated.
Or the Republican presidential nominees.
Yes.
Who would like very much to take us back to the 50s or maybe a little earlier. When you talk...
There was a good piece I just wanted to bring up. Well, there's I saw a couple of them in a cluster of days, but they're about comparing how Barack Obama talks about women and how Donald Trump talks about women, and also the way that Donald Trump talks in a very sexist way, both about men and women. So his sexism isn't just directed at his focus on women's looks as being their most important quality, and everything else is just not important, but also the way that he talks about men and goes after men's, sense of their worth or masculinity in an attempt to demonstrate how much of an alpha male he is.
Little Marco.
That kind of stuff especially. Well, hey guys, we're about 3 minutes away from the top of the hour. I feel like I've been I don't know if you're sitting in quiet contemplation or I'm pulling things out of you this one.
I've been trying to come up with a response to the blackface thing, and it's tough. it's a tough one to come back to.
Did you ever see that growing up, or was that already off the air by the time you kind of remember television?
Oh no, I saw it a lot in Tom and Jerry, especially with Tom's owner and things like that. Very stereotypical black woman from the South and things like that. So it was still very much on air. I wanted to mention something about how Warner Brothers refuses to censor it, but their reasoning is that what they're showing is products of the time, and even though they are bad, they should never not be shown, because, like you says, if we scrub it out, we forget about it, and the worst thing we can possibly do is to forget that.
There is a chocolate, so there's a chocolate museum in Cologne, which is awesome. Just having a chocolate museum is awesome, but the gift shop is even better. You walk in, and there's, how you go to the deli or something, there's this big case of meat that just extends forever. Well, they have that, but with truffles. And it just goes on and on forever. And they even have things like chocolate, cocoa-flavored pasta, and the coffee shop there is, the cafe is to die for. But it's one of the chocolate products that they have dates from way back, like in the early 1900s. And the character is, I think he's meant to be sort of a mix of Arab, but like a dark-skinned African Arab. And they have the old stuff back from like the 1930s, and it is so obviously racist. As an uncomfortable kind of racism. But then as you go through the display, you see that they're moderating the character or the image of the person over time, and to now where he's not at all offensive. And yeah, so when I first went in there, I was shocked just to see it, because in the States you would not have that kind of, you wouldn't keep it around like maybe there are probably, I'm being a bit naive, there are probably places around the States in certain areas where you can get little racist things still, but just to see it in a museum, shall we say, but yeah, I thought about how far we have come. We obviously still have a long way to go, but I don't know how you could look at that and not be offended in that day and age, and yet people were surrounded by images like that clearly all the time in entertainment, in their advertising, in everything. And it's shocking to me, like how you could have a society like that.
Yeah, I grew up in a place that was at least as white as where you were from, maybe whiter, if that's possible. And we had almost no interaction with people of other cultures, especially black people, or Asians or Hispanics. And I think a lot of the racism that we were raised with was casual and not necessarily
the overt kind.
Well, not necessarily so overt, but also not necessarily as pointed and evil as some of the other stuff. We grew up, was it hazelnuts? We called nigger toes.
Oh yeah, back in the days, yeah. When you have that mixed in, yeah, that kind of stuff.
And when you in fishing with a cane pole, just throwing a bobber in, on a line with the cane pole and sitting back and waiting for the fish to bite was nigger fishing. It was just, that's where we didn't think anything of it. It was just, that was the thing to say. And when I grew up, when I was in college, I met some black folks, and I started thinking about this, and I was appalled at myself. And I think anymore you don't see that. At least I don't think you do around here. And a lot of that is due, I think, to we got a lot of Hmong people. After the Vietnam War, Wisconsin took in an awful lot of people from the highlands of Vietnam and Thailand, I think, Cambodia, the Hmong people. And we got a lot of Spanish-speaking people now. And where I'm from, Menominee, Wisconsin, has a university that's internationally known for what it does, technology and that sort of thing. And we have a lot of people from Africa and Asia that have showed up and are just part of the community. And when I was growing up, that was just not there.
Yeah, and also there's, we talked about consciousness raising, and there's been a lot of that going on. And I know that when discussions happen about racism, it's easy to point at the South, but Milwaukee is a more segregated city than any city in the South.
Right.
And we're both have those Wisconsin roots. And yeah, there's also, I've heard African American, I think they were university students who had gone and were dealing with talking about issues of racism on campus, and they were in Minnesota. They went to McAllister or some, like lovely liberal arts college, and were picked up by a group of white students who had brought them in for the talk and asked, well, what kind of issues have you had with racism? They're like, oh, well, we don't have any problems like that on our campus. And this sort of Midwest nice way of being racist, which is to be racist in really passive-aggressive ways, or passive ways, or as opposed to just sort of the in-your-face stuff, which is when you then bring up to people what they're doing, they're really offended. So it's, and I think there are also really good studies that just point to the fact that one of the reasons why racial issues are so problematic is because white people are afraid to talk about them and ask about them, and so the conversation doesn't really happen. And when we talk about safe spaces, there is a situation where that's a huge issue. But when I've actually made it a point to listen to what people have to say about their experience with the police or customs or anything else, then it's just story after story after story that I have no experience with. I'm annoyed if I'm picked at random in a line, let alone sort of like being seen coming and know that I'm going to get picked as soon as I get up for the security, sweep. So, I think we've come a long way, but it's not nearly enough. And it's great that, especially in the media, there's a lot more diversity, but there is still a silence around a lot of, I think less around gay issues now, but there's still a lot of silence around racial issues in the U.S. And we're really off atheism as a topic, but I hope everyone else is enjoying the rest of the conversation.
Yeah.
Because that's also, you know, I mean, for Xander, there are definitely issues. I mean, they're not sort of as clear cut, let's say, around background. It's a different. It's a different way of it because there are racial tensions in the UK. But the population is also so much smaller than in the US. People tend to have a greater Muslim populations in cities like Birmingham or London, and then you go up to areas like Aberystwyth, and there's not going to be a whole big community there. So the kinds of, I'm sure, racial issues too that need to get discussed, or even the problems with second, third, and fourth wave generation families who have come from Pakistan or India, who have basically fully integrated but still face barriers, even though they're really truly they're as British as anybody, as British as any other kid born that day.
I was in Scotland probably longer ago than Xander is old, and there's a you know what a bothy is, Xander?
No.
Okay. Well,
you
in
might have to say it with a Scottish accent to get the right pronunciation.
Bothy. I don't know. I can't, I can't do it. I'm so damn American. Anyway, there's the small town that my great grandfather was from, and my grandfather lived in when he was very young. Is on a sea lock near the Isle of Skye. It's a very tiny village.
Oh yeah, I know Skye.
And well, it's on Loch Carron, so it's a sea lock from inland from there. And it was just prototypically. I mean, when you drive into town, there's this golf course, but it's not a manicured American sort of golf course. It's just a Scottish golf course. It's it's a bunch of pastures hung together with holes. It's lovely, and you have these picturesque little stores in the harbor with all the fishing boats. And there's a store, a little convenience sort of store, really old building called the Bothy, and Bothy is a term for a shelter that a shepherd would use in the sticks when they were herding sheep away from town. Just their shelter for the night. So it's prototypically Highland Scottish thing. We walked in, and the proprietor was Jamaican, and he had a Scottish accent. And I was thinking, mind blown. What the hell is this? This is not a McDonald from my bloodline. But it was amazing. I mean, and that's all through all through Scotland. I've never been to the lower that south of the border stuff, the Mexico of Scotland. But all through Scotland, I've seen people, Pakistani, other Middle Eastern, Asian, African.
Yeah. There's some great Caribbean neighborhood area, like restaurants and heritage in London.
Yeah, right. It's and your takeout is almost all Indian, from what I can tell.
Yeah.
Or pizza.
And Chinese.
And Chinese. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that, and it seems, correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't a lot of that from the Empire?
Yeah, I'd say so. I'd say we have two main takeaways, which is Indian / Pakistani and Chinese, which are both places that England, ruled back in the Empire.
Yeah, they had to go out and conquer the world in order to get better takeaway.
Yeah.
So like,
yeah. But those are two, the main. They're the staple ones. I mean, I'd say even pizza isn't as prevalent over here than the other two are.
Right.
And there's this great vegetarian Indian restaurant on near Euston Station in London, on Drummond Street, where if I am anywhere in the neighborhood, I always go there because I eat the dosas until I'm in a pain, and then I keep going. So good. All right, guys. Well, I think now that we're 10 minutes after 8, and I have another hangout that I'm doing at 10:30. So I'm doing another hangout in about 2 hours. I still have to prep a little bit. Just for those watching, it will be a hangout that is evaluating Noel Plum's video part 1 on his idea that is there a rape culture? No. And so that's what the Hangout is going to be responding to, and I just have a few more things to finish up for that. But this has been a lovely chat. I felt a little bit like a seminar sometimes, like I was pulling things out of you, really deep stuff from the lecture that you didn't feel confident speaking about. But other than that, it was great. And then, Matt, next time we'll make sure to get your mic checked. And then, yes. So hold on a little bit. If you guys, I'll say goodbye to you off air. But for the rest of you watching, thanks for watching all the way to the end of the video. Don't forget to come back if you're going to be awake at 10:30 my time. I think that's 4:30 Eastern Standard Time. It's on the channel subscription thing. Just go and look there. I've been Kristi, guys, and you've been awesome. Thanks, and talk to you later. Bye.